Hello again, and welcome back to Where Do We Go From Here with Scott Catello. In this episode 10, we will be discussing AI in the world of graphic design and illustration, what's currently being used in the industry, how it's being viewed and utilized in the classroom, and moreover, is it lessening or pushing the level of creativity? And for this episode, I'm pleased to be interviewing Dave Chow, a professional illustrator and artist here in my backyard of Detroit, Michigan. It should be no surprise to my listeners as to why I would invite Dave to the show, as we share two of the same passions outside of design, cars, and music, which I guess makes us quintessential Detroiters. Now, I first met Dave, I believe in 2014, as a juror for the Scholastic Art Awards hosted by the Center for Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan. I have since been a juror there every year for the Scholastic Awards. That's a great platform for high school students to get their work recognized. And that being said, Dave, please tell the listeners a little bit about your background and what you do.
Geez, I've been illustrating since forever and a day. I work as a professional illustrator. I graduated from CCS eons ago, and I've pretty much been steadily employed ever since. I graduated there actually as a graphic design major. I didn't necessarily cut it as an illustrator because back then, you were geared toward working for a studio, and studios painted and drew cars. Well, I'm more of a cartoonist, and I don't have the patience to paint that well. So I was told to go into graphic design, which I could still do. But the thing was, I pretty much took the majority of my classes in advertising and product. So anyway, I've just been drawing forever and a day. I work in advertising. I do TV. I do film. I do movies. My bread and butter is pretty much doing TV commercials. So I've been for 35 plus years. I get to draw for a living, so I can't complain. I taught for 17 years. I got out of school, worked for about 15 or so. Finally felt as though I had enough to give back to the classroom, because I thought that was important. So I brought real life experience into the classroom with me every chance I could. So I taught for 17 years, and I quit teaching about 4 years ago, and I just jumped back into the business. So it's still fun.
Well, that's great. And I'm super jealous because you get to draw every day. So that's
well, every day, and like this morning, every night too. So I mean, right now you're talking to me on like 4 hours of sleep. So, but that's my lot in life. I'm kind of part vampire at this job, but that's
I totally get it.
Yeah.
So let's get into the meaty part of the conversation.
Oh boy, meat potatoes. Meat and potatoes. That's always good. So let's go for it.
So to start the conversation, I personally have been using Firefly a little bit, more just to test it out and for curiosity's sake. Yeah. But my first question to you is, are there any AI or generative AI tools that you're now using in trying it out or in your designs?
Yeah, I'm trying out a little of everything right about now just to see how it works, experimenting with it, dabbling with it. Am I using it in my work? Not necessarily. I'm just seeing where it's going to go. I'm at the early stages, just testing it out. I'm just hearing lots of backlash on it. And I was like, well, I'll try it. But, you'll never know that I use, that I'm dabbling in it. But it's not really in my workflow just yet. I see it in a lot of discussions, and I'm just seeing where it's going. Probably like you, we're at the initial stages of it. The genie's been out of the bottle.
And what kind of software platforms are you trying out?
I pretty much dabble. It was a Midjourney. That's about it. So,
okay.
Type in a couple prompts, see what it kicks out. That's all. And it's interesting. It's neat. It's kind of fun.
Right. You kind of tipped into the next question I had for you. In using AI text as an image generator, I found the process isn't nearly as creative as I anticipated. And I state this as, for me, art and meeting is often in the process itself. And I state this as the journey kind of, to me, is always the reward in a lot of cases. However, in using the text to image generators, the only creativity seemingly comes from how creative you can be with the prompting. So how do you see AI impacting graphic arts, illustration, or art in general moving forward, good or bad?
I guess good or bad, it's kind of touchy to discuss. Just because, depending how people want to use it. If I want to use it to jumpstart ideas, to brainstorm, I think that's great. But now if I suddenly want to make like the Scott Catello like put your head on, the back end of a goat using AI, that might not be a good thing. You know what I mean? So I look at it as a good idea generator. I don't see it necessarily being used for finished art, even though I see people doing it. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing about it. I'm almost 99% sure that my stuff has already been scraped and skimmed and put into the generator already. I think anybody that's been working in the industry for the last 30, 40, 50 years has probably had their stuff scraped to a certain degree. Whether, can I get it back? No. I think a lot of people have already had their stuff taken. It's kind of, I look at it like music sampling. Once it's taken, it's like, well, geez, how do you track down somebody who's using it, So there's not much I can do about it at that point. I'm just trying to look forward to, what can be done. How do we, as creative people, stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah. And the copyright part is a difficult one right now, because that's basically at the forefront of everybody's mind. And I know on going back like February 21st of last year, the Copyright Office decided that AI image generators are not entitled to copyright protection. But do the images they produce amount to copyright infringement? And one thing I noticed regarding the platforms is that some offer purely copywritten material and some do not. If that's the case, Dave, is AI grabbing everything from artists' work? Is anything going to be real anymore?
I don't know. Again, I don't know how and where they grab it. If you can't copyright it, if I'm working advertising or anything of the sort, do I feel right in using it? Because, that means I don't necessarily own the art, or I'm sorry, own the image. How's about that? I actually got into a conversation with somebody. Is it art or is it an image? And, right about now, I think they're right. It's an image. It's not necessarily art. It serves a purpose. But again, if I'm a client, paying, say somebody, a creative person like you or I, if I'm paying you to do work, I want to own it at the end of the day, as opposed to like, hey, Scott, thanks for creating some great AI images for me. Who owns it? Anybody? So I think for advertisers, I think it would behoove them to own the art at the end of the day.
That's a good statement. And it's funny that you, in your last comment, you integrated the idea of, as it relates to music, because that's been one of the subjects for a long time in music, is if I go out and I buy a song from David Bowie, do I now own that song and I can give it to whoever else because I own it? That MP3, right?
It's usage, at that point, So I think with AI imagery, it's just, I actually had a discussion with a friend of mine. We're talking like English majors, because they know how to write proper prompts. They might actually be the next, image makers of the future.
That's a good point. One thing, you found the same thing, but for myself, the prompting is a big stumbling block for me. And it's funny because for somebody in my field and yours who are generally detailed people, it's a bit of a stumbling block. You almost have to be a programmer to be able to write the appropriate prompts to get what you want.
Yeah, exactly. I think for the people who aren't afraid of AI, we're going to be, hopefully we're going to be the people that learn how to, figure out, okay, what words do I use? And then, what platform do we go with? Do we go with, what's Google's? Was it Genie or whatever it is? I'm trying to remember. There's so many people diving into it right about now, So, what's the platform that's going to, it's a dog eat dog out there right now. I know like Midjourney was one of the first ones out there. That's why I jumped on it initially to try it. But all these other ones jumping out, I don't know where we're going to go yet,
Yeah, and I've been Midjourney's a good one. The DALL-E 3 is pretty impressive as well. As these platforms are being inserted into so many of our daily lives, in many ways, they're beneficial as they do increase efficiency and save time and money. I get all that. But does it come at a cost as it pertains to creativity? So I guess I ask, how do you see AI intersecting design and more specifically graphic design and illustration? And do you think it'll diminish personalization and creativity in art?
No, I think it's a good jump starter for people. If you're still creative, you're still going to be creative. I'm going to throw a little bit of history into this right about now. I think you and I were both of the same age. Like when we were in school, we were I attended CCS when they only had 4 computers. So, I was still painting and drawing, paintbrush in hand and, and using X-Acto blades and things like that. And then also we saw, oh my God, here comes a Macintosh computer that can ink better than I can. Yeah. So, I know like keyliners lost their job. Typesetters, for the most part, lost their jobs because now I can typeset at my desktop. So I've got a little bit more type control. So yeah, I've seen that to a certain degree. I've seen some amazingly creative people just like, that's it, I'm stepping out of the business because I don't want to learn the computer. That's their choice. But I think if you're truly creative, you're going to learn how to use it. It's just another tool. That's all. So I'm not necessarily worried about AI. I think it's a good place to jumpstart ideas for truly creative people. That's all. And I'm going to look at it that way for now.
No, I think it's a good way to look at it. And I gather from your statement that you see this as just another step in the sort of evolution, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I can only imagine like, if you're an old, like an old oil painter from, a couple hundred years ago, all of a sudden, oh my God, they got this new thing called gouache. If you're a really good painter, are you going to worry about the medium? Or, oh my God, acrylic is on the scene. I'm like, I don't know. I guess I try not to think about creative snobbery in that sense. You're going to be creative whether you're using a stick or whether you're using like latest version of Procreate. So I think creativity is still going to be there unless AI can outthink one of us. I don't know. And that day might come. And, hopefully by then I'm going to be doing the big dirt nap and I don't have to worry about it. But I think it's just going to be another creative tool for really creative people to use.
No, interesting. Because I think, when you say that, I think back to like animators, for example. Like when I think back to the old Disney animators and then the evolution of the computer. And a little bit of my concern is that level of talent, it just kind of fades away. But it was an incredible amount of talent, those people that could hand animate things, which is now all be done by the computer.
Mm-hmm. But, I also had a friend of mine I remember he had like one of the early versions of Photoshop. He got it and he learned Photoshop so well that if you took a look at one of his original gouache paintings and some of his early Photoshop work, you couldn't tell the difference. So I think, if there's a way which you can still, like right now you're talking computers, I mean, they could draw, the line quality is just as good as somebody who does it by hand and probably faster. And, they can animate, crisper and a little bit slicker. They're doing certain things that those old guys wish they could do. I hope. At least that's where I'm hoping, that people are using it in a moral and ethical kind of way like that. I hope.
And here's a big question for you. Well, here's one of two big questions I'm going to ask you.
I don't have the winning lottery numbers. I'm sorry. No winning lottery numbers here. So.
Well, that's really unfortunate. But as a former professor, you taught university level for a long time. What are your thoughts on AI being used in the classroom specifically for illustration and graphics?
Just be upfront with it. Just say, hey, I'm using it. Is it any different than you and I looking up reference? AI does a lot of the legwork for you. But at the end of the day, how do you own it? How do you make it your own? I think that's the biggest thing right there. I always look at like AI can produce some amazingly gorgeous images, but do you really own it? Did you really create it other than typing in a handful of prompts? What's your spin on it? Like I look back, the analog days, like, okay, I got to draw, like a woman opening a car door. Well, guess what? I'm going to shoot reference on a woman. I'm going to shoot that, that car door, shoot reference and trace over it. So there's a certain degree that I still own the image, even though I cobbled together photographs. So how do you mash up certain things? I think AI to a certain degree is like a really sophisticated, like collage tool. And it's gathering reference at a exponentially faster rate than I ever could. That's all. But there's a certain point when I have to take control of it. I have to own it. And I think for anybody creating artwork, if you think, just typing a couple prompts, you're suddenly an artist. I don't think you are.
Interesting. So from a professor's perspective, and again, like we had talked earlier, that the AI is just going out and grabbing a bunch of copyright and material for the most part, sometimes not. But when a student turns in something to you, would you expect them to cite their sources?
Yes.
In that image?
Yeah,
okay.
Totally. I did that before pre-AI anyway. I want to see it done in front of me. I want to see, what your reference material is. I also have a radio show that I do out of the University of Detroit Mercy. And I talked to some of my academic friends over there. They're like, we can't necessarily send a kid home and have them write a 10-page paper on Socrates because, they're going to just type in a chat GPT and it spits out 10-page paper. So now they're, even academically, okay, can you write a 3-page paper in class? You have to prove that, are you capable? Are you knowledgeable? So, just because you could type in prompts and, it spits out 10-page paper, there's so many times, I've heard the librarian over there go, they're actually having students write the paper and then having the librarian cite the sources for them. Aren't you supposed to get your sources first and then cobble together your understanding, your thoughts of it, your interpretation on an idea? So I think with, like AI, it should be the same thing. You can find the reference material, but what point do you put together and at what point do you own that artwork?
Right. And I think what you discussed, Dave, is how I guess I was kind of taught in design school is you always develop the concept first, and then the concept answers all the questions for you all the way through, as long as you keep going back to that original concept or idea.
Yeah, totally. And, even for somebody like me, doing storyboards, I've always told art directors, copywriters, and producers, is like, if you've got a lousy idea, let's just say it's a weak idea, my drawings aren't necessarily going to save your project. If it's a weak concept, it's a weak concept. My drawings aren't going to make, it might sell it a little bit better, but it's still going to be a weak concept, so you need to have the good bones behind it. You need to have a good, solid idea that you can push and explore. So I agree totally with that, having the right concepts.
My last meaty question for you, Dave.
Oh, okay. Meat.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a good one. Given that history and society, in my opinion, measures progression a lot of times by the arts, what does it tell you about where we're at right now? And for people many, many years from now, looking back, what are they going to think?
I think back to like my wife's grandfather. He was born before flight and things like that. You talk to some of the students now, like, wait a minute, you mean you don't remember 9/11 or you don't remember Y2K and things like that? I think this is another huge leap forward. Like computers were to you and I. Back in 1987, Adobe was a little hut in the desert, that people stayed cool in, Now it's like it's all over the place. It's such a part of in my lifestyle. I'm using the Creative Suite left and right. I think most of us in creativity are. So I see this just another leap forward, and to me, it's like, is this the next gouache? Is this the next acrylic, to the oil painter? That's all. So I think historically, we're doing it again.
So you think, I take it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I take it that you think it'll be looked on favorably.
I hope so. I hope that people have some ethics about it, like I said, and do more good than harm with it. But I don't know. Like I said, I just hope that that's the route it goes. But I don't know. I'm hoping for the creative class, it'll still be a tool for them to use and not be afraid of.
Oh, very good. Well, Dave, I can't thank you enough for your time on this important subject that I love dearly. And we'll probably have to set up at some point another podcast for you, me, just to talk about cars and music. But before that, where can people find your work?
Right about now, I'm heavily involved in like Instagram. I'm one of those idiots. 4 years ago, my phone wasn't capable. I had too much loaded up on it, so I didn't get Instagram then. And as soon as I got it, doggone, I said, I'm going to post an image a day. So if you want to look me up on Dave Chow Art, on Instagram, I literally post an image every day, minimally. Because I've also got like 1,001 sketchbooks. I just cull from that and I just put that stuff up there. So if you're looking, I'm just putting it out there, just having fun with it. One of these days I'll probably collect all those images and make a book at some point. But until then, I'm just drawing. It's good practice. Sometimes I put professional work. A lot of times I just put fun stuff up there just so I can do it. It's an experiment. And my Instagram page is pretty much so I can, okay, I'm going to try a new filter on Photoshop. I'm going to try a new line technique. I'm going to try something different. So it's an area for me to experiment and just have some fun with.
Any quick advice for young designers or young graphic artists?
Be as creative as possible, soak in everything, have a sense of history, drive, ambition. I think since I've left teaching 4 years ago, I think one of the big things that I look back at how I got out of school was have a sense for the business, get to know the business end of it before you step out. Understand what arena you're stepping into, understand what your image is, understand, simple things like billing, understand, what a non-disclosure agreement is, understand how to negotiate, because right about now you're 20 some years old. you're full of energy, you're full of life, you're full of ambition, but if you don't understand the industry, make sure you step into it correctly. That's all.
Good advice. I think we'll leave, Dave. Seems appropriate to give you a softball question on the way out, but what are some of your favorite bands and some songs from those bands?
Ooh, crimey. Oh, that's a tough one because I listen to everything.
Right. So this ended up being the hardest question for you?
It is. It totally is. Because, here's the thing. I listen to NPR all day long, okay? And I listen to WDT locally. And the thing that I've always liked about Detroit is I grew up as a kid. I listened to, the Electrifying Mojo. I don't know if you remember him at all. But, he was a guy who could play like Jay Giles, segues into Prince, segues into Kraftwerk, segues into the B-52s. So, it's like, here it is, you're mixing genres, just segues that flow seamlessly. So, on any given afternoon, I can listen to country western, to Coltrane, to REM, to Amy Winehouse. So I listen to a little of everything. And, have I made any purchases as of late? Not really, but, I listen to everything. I just see what's out there. Do I like all of it? No. A lot of, I also do a lot of work for a lot of the local rappers here too. So I'm like, I like their music. Would I necessarily go out and buy it? Maybe, So I listen to all of everything. I mean, right about now, like this morning, I got stuck in my early 90s, garage rock. By this afternoon, I could be listening to smooth jazz for all I know. I don't know. I just wing it. I look at my iTunes library and I got weird mixes of like, what was I thinking?
You're eclectic. That's what I would expect.
Yeah. It's like I will listen to a little of everything. One of my idols right now is, I adore listening to Don Was. His knowledge. I mean, he plays a little of everything on his show, and I just love. He's also got the stories behind them. I love hearing the creative aspect in regards to music. How does he come up with that stuff? It's just working with other creative people. It's just another form of creativity I like hearing. That's all.
Well, Dave, I certainly appreciate your time, and I would definitely recommend the listeners check out your Instagram page and check out your work.
Find me there. If you need help, if you need work, if you need a resource, if you need goofy trivia answered, hit me up. I'm also good with that too. So
thank you again, Dave.
My pleasure. Take care.
Big thanks to Dave Chow for his insight on AI in graphic arts. And I highly recommend checking out Dave's Instagram page at Dave Chow Art, as his work is, well, kind of like Dave. It's quirky, fun, but really talented. I agree in part with Dave's assessment also, as AI is a further tool lending itself to more creative exploration and creativity. I do, however, believe there is a cause for tracking its usage, so it doesn't become a crutch for designers, or more concerning, a simple image creator without a sense of concept or discernment. As for me, a little known fact as an architect, I minored in graphic arts and was a software trainer for Adobe Suite products way back in the day. And as such, this is a subject that I will certainly revisit as it progresses. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Where Do We Go From Here, and tell your friends to listen and subscribe. Also keep the mail and feedback coming. And one more action item for you out there, email me some show ideas. I would love to hear them. And now a little outro music. And since Dave and I are both in Detroit and we love Detroit music, I knew he would appreciate perhaps one of the most quintessential Detroit bands, with one of the most quintessential Detroit songs. If you didn't catch it at the beginning, it's a short version I recorded of MC5's Kick Out the Jams. Till next time.